Hello, Montana. Hello, world. This is Chris Hislop from the Montana World Affairs Council and another episode of Connect Montana, where we bring the world to Montana and Montana to the world. Following on the last 2 weeks' themes, where we had people from our state and our communities talk about the international dimensions of their work in communities, this week promises to be an extraordinary week. We have a number of nonprofit organizations that are Montana-based, but have international engagement and or international operations. As we all know, Montana has a very vibrant nonprofit community covering all kinds of interesting topics and issues and providing many services, not just to people in our communities here in Montana, but around the world. And so we're going to have a chance to talk with several of the leaders of these organizations this week to try to get their perspective on how their work engages the world and what that might mean for Montana and Montanans. Our first guest is David Cates. David and his wife Rosalie live in Missoula, and they have 3 grown daughters and a couple grandchildren. As of June 1st, he is again the executive director of Missoula Medical Aid, a nonprofit organization that provides public health and surgery services and supports agriculture and economic development projects in Honduras. He began with Missoula Medical Aid in 1998 and was an interpreter and team leader on more than 40 brigades to Honduras. David has worked as a laborer, commercial fisherman, paralegal, a teacher of English, a sports reporter, a concessionaire at a classic repertory theater, a fishing guide, a taxi driver. He played professional basketball in Costa Rica and crewed on a banana ship in the Caribbean, taught writing in Mexico City prison, lectured at the University of Guanajuato, sorry for butchering that one, and volunteered at a shelter for migrants in Oaxaca. David has completed travel assignments for the New York Times in Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Spain. He's also a fiction writer and poet, including 5 novels and a chapbook on poetry. He's the winner of the 2010 Montana Arts Council's Innovative Artist Award, and his short story, Rubber Boy, was a distinguished story for the 2010 Best American Short Stories. David, you are very welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming. Over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Well, my instructions were to talk about who I am, and I think you already did that a little. But my relationship to Missoula Medical Aid started at the 1998 after Hurricane Mitch. There was a group of people here that in the office of what was called Nightingale Nursing. Now it's Montana Community Health. Bill Woody's office. He had a little office down in the corner South and Higgins. And they said, hey, there's this big natural disaster in Honduras. Let's see what we can do. And there was he had a few employees who were looking for ways to contribute. And they called a Missoulian reporter, and I saw it in the paper the next day. I just finished a draft of a novel, and I was kind of looking to put new wind in my head. And I had a lot of experience in Latin America. So I thought, well, I'll go down and check out and see what they're doing. And I began helping with gathering supplies and went on a couple of teams in the just 4 months after, within 4 months. And then I thought, this is something I can do. I can work as an interpreter, and I can help the Hondurans understand who we are, and our volunteers understand the Honduran needs. And it was like, it was fun, it was interesting, and I felt like I could do it. So I continued with Missoula Medical Aid and started to raise money and became the executive director, and did that for 18 years. In 2017, I stepped down, and somebody with a new director came in, and she's been there about 2.5 years or so. And as of last month, she decided she was going to be stepping down today, actually, June 1st or May 31st. And they needed somebody to step in during this interim, in which everything shut down, and we couldn't send a team in April, which I coincidentally was going to be a volunteer on. And our partners in Honduras are scrambling to see what it is that they need. And most people have been in their homes for 3 months, even in Honduras. And so the whole organization is in this kind of wait and see mode. I like to say we're standing there still holding hands with our Honduran partners, but waiting for the next song. And then maybe we have learned new steps too. So that's been my relationship with Missoula Medical Aid. It's been a wonderful and interesting adventure to be able to travel to Honduras that many times, dozens and dozens of times, and take hundreds, literally hundreds of volunteers, 500 some different volunteers, primarily medical and translators, to work in rural communities or in regional hospitals. And during the course of that time, Missoula Medical Aid grew to support local projects that had to do with agriculture or community development. Our mission was to work with partners in their effort to increase access to healthcare and also make communities healthier. So that in Honduras, so it was narrow as far as Honduras, but it was wide as far as what we could do as relationship to health issues. So we've done a lot of programs with food development, nutrition, farm programs, small businesses in rural and isolated areas of Honduras, and our partnerships with the hospital and Save the Children Honduras and the Lions Club of a particular town that has an eye and dental clinic have been key to our work. We really don't do anything by ourselves. We have found people and partners we trust who are involved in these kinds of the same mission we are, increasing access to healthcare and helping communities be healthier, who are doing this 12 months of the year. And we help with small grants, and we help with sending volunteers to fill particular niches that they find they could use our help with. So that's been the key to Missoula Medical Aid's success, the trusted partnerships with 3 particular entities in Honduras who are doing this work all the time, and we just are doing our little part to help. So that's the main thing I think that is important to remember as far as the work we do and the way we see our role in any kind of good works going on in Honduras. These are projects planned and executed by our partners that we simply help out with. We have a little statement, actually, I'd like to read about the things that we believe in with Missoula Medical Aid. We believe in healthy, self-sustaining Honduran communities in which adequate nutrition, potable water, safe home environments, and medical care is accessible to all. We believe in providing medical treatment for those with immediate health problems and helping to develop and fund programs that begin to alleviate health problems at their root cause. We believe in addressing all the basic components that affect health, including nutrition, agriculture, environment, education, and more. These are big statements, and they're big desires, and I want to emphasize that we do small works in these. We don't solve any big problems. We help Hondurans who are trying to make these things more true. We believe it is the right thing to lend a hand to people who live so close to the edge that a slight medical problem can send them tumbling. So we're talking about people who are subsistence farmers, families that are just getting by feeding themselves, and a small medical problem can send the whole thing tumbling, the family's entire capacity to feed itself. So an illness can cause nutrition problems, and nutrition problems can cause illness. We believe that those with resources and medical talent should help them to use them to help them where both are scarce. This comes to a big part of how I've seen Missoula Medical Aid, and we've seen ourselves in this organization as kind of a funnel that can strategically direct funds from a place where certain things are in abundance here to places where they're more scarce. So the placement of that funnel and where those funds go is completely the work. Raising the funds, of course, and then directing them. So a place where resources and certain talents are abundant to a place where those things may be more scarce. And we believe that our success relies on vibrant and effective partnerships with local Honduran organizations that are forging solutions for long-term health solutions. In this way, we always feel like we are joining an effort that is started before we got there, and will be there after we are gone. That's the way we've really always tried to position ourselves and remind ourselves we aren't doing anything except for helping people down there who are engaged in the tasks that correspond with our mission. So that's the main idea of Missoula Medical Aid and what we've tried to adhere to. And you also asked me to talk a little bit about why this matters to Montanans or to the in the big picture. And I had a few thoughts on that. One was Central America and Mexico, Latin America is very close. It's close geographically. To fly to Central America from particularly the southern part of the United States is as close as flying to any place in the United States. It's not overseas. It's just simply across some political borders. And we have a history of involvement in that part of the world that is complicated and deep and troubled. The area was generally the area south of the Mexican border was settled, of course, by Spaniards who came in and imposed a feudal system on the indigenous populations that were there. And what has developed from that is a system that's very much based on class, a few wealthy people, and then the vast majority of people without much at all. And that system was kept in place by a continued imperialism that came from the United States, the Banana Republic idea that and where we helped the ruling class essentially in a way of to help our investments in that area to make sure that our businesses were thriving. So we have a long involvement, and we've been involved in a lot of proxy wars in Latin America, wars that have resulted in untold thousands of deaths. And so and now we're involved in a drug war essentially in Central America and Mexico. And since the end of the Cold War, there's been a rise in organized crime in Central America and Mexico, which we're all aware of. And we are fighting that, spending millions and millions of dollars to try to stem the flow of narcotics up here. And we're spending millions and millions of dollars trying to stem the flow of build a wall, for instance, to keep immigrants from coming up and trying to escape situations that can be desperate and dangerous. And so part of the reasoning is if if we as a people, a political people, the United States of America have chosen to spend that much money to do those things, we can spend a few thousand trying to make the communities that those people are trying to leave healthier and more livable. So to me, we're already involved. The Central America and Latin America and the United States we are involved politically in that part of the world. This is a humanitarian effort, so if we can justify as a country spending the amount of money we're spending on political military projects, then we certainly can justify spending a few thousand on humanitarian projects, which, as I say, affect greatly immigration. And we work in communities that are pocked with holes left by people who've left. If a young person who wants to have a better life, who envisions a different life, looks around and they can see, well, I can do this or this, and this one's illegal, and this one's barely getting by. I'm going to try to do something new, or try to escape an imminent danger. So if we can do anything to help that kind of situation, that's tied in completely with what our nation has decided is important, which is what's going on in Latin America. So that's why I think it's important, because we've already decided it's important as this country, as a nation, and so humanitarian efforts are consistent with everything everything else we talk about when it comes to immigration.
David, thanks a lot for that intro. I mean, it's really fascinating work, and it's not just fascinating, but it's also long-term. Missoula Medical Aid has been working in Honduras for nearly 2 decades now. You mentioned this very interesting term, self-sustaining. Maybe not all of our viewers understand this concept of sustainability in community development and in community engagement. I wonder if you could say a few words, maybe, comparing or contrasting a kind of well-meaning short-term charity work versus a more longer-term sustainable outcome that Missoula Medical Aid is looking for in their work.
That's interesting that I said that. I would like to hear exactly how I used it, because I've of course, if you do this kind of work, you think about that, and it's a word that's used all the time: sustaining, sustainable. And I try to wrap my head around it to a certain degree. There are things we do that are only sustainable because volunteers step forward and do them. If we send orthopedic teams down to repair hands, for instance, they go down, they work for a week, they do 25 surgeries, which are often life-changing with mangled hands, so that's not sustaining unless you keep sending teams down. We also, there's orthopedic surgeons in Honduras, but they're not working in these areas where we're working. There's no money, this has to be done by volunteers, because the people who are doing it for I cannot pay. So there's a lot of work that's simply only sustainable because people are stepping forward and doing it. Then there's other work, which is helping groups of Hondurans who have a capacity and a desire to work together to build a small business, say. We've supported a lot of these corn mills. So people grow corn, they make masa, which is the dough that you make tortillas out of. And so a community will give a grant, and a community will have a machine that can grind corn, and they will get training on how to operate it and how to work together. And it'll be a little business where people can grind their corn for a few pennies every day to make their masa. And the group that runs it will start to get some money, and pretty soon they have some money, and then they grow potatoes the next year too, and they get more cash, and pretty soon the families involved in running these things have a little bit of income. If they have a kid who's sick, they can buy medicine. If they want to get irrigation on their potatoes next year so they can grow in the dry season, they can buy a little pump. So we've seen these businesses grow and thrive. Nobody's getting rich, but there's a lot of people who suddenly have a capacity to make improvements in their lives that they didn't have before. And that's with small grants. And those I think of as sustainable, as things that our contribution is a little seed, and if the group works well together, and we have people in Honduras who are just really, really brilliant as far as finding groups of people who want to do something together, will take a grant and make something of it. We've seen beautiful successes. In fact, the amount of successes is I would never have guessed how many of these things really work well 5, 6, 7, 8 years into the future. And those kind of things are sustainable. But a lot of acute health problems, that's not necessarily sustainable when you're working with people who have really no money. The only way it is for us and Honduran docs too, who work with us, to go out and offer that kind of care. And medicines that wouldn't be available otherwise. So those things require constant input. And no.
Well, David, the way you describe, both the kind of, the medical work and the longer term community development work, it's not hard, I think, to see that it is life changing in many ways. I wonder if you could say a couple things, however, from the other direction. You have teams or brigades that go down to Honduras very often. Could you touch on a little bit how maybe your own life has changed by this work and the lives of your colleagues who come from Montana and maybe from other states? How have their lives changed, and maybe has there been any kind of return here in our communities and in our state thanks to the experience that your volunteers have had in Honduras?
Well, it's hard to generalize, or it's hard to be specific. And we've sent literally hundreds of volunteers, and their own stories as that experience mingles into their own stories, and they have some particular thing that they have experienced, and that I can't articulate. Okay, so but I can speak generally, and generally, to remove yourself from the culture that you are living in day to day, that is your world, that it's the water, that's your fish, this is the water you swim in, and take yourself into a world that is so different. When you return, you see your own world differently. It's not so much that you know a whole lot more about Honduras. You know a little bit, you've had an experience. But when you come back, you're able to see your own life and your own culture more distinctly, more clearly. You're able to, we all think the same things in our culture, and we just think them because we think that's the way you think about them. And then you spend time in another culture and you come back, and everything about your culture you understand it doesn't have to be that way. It could be this way. So people bring back an enriched vision of their own lives. And to me, that's not part of our mission statement, but I'm glad you bring it up, because it's certainly been a benefit. I think with the hundreds of volunteers who've gone down and worked with us, and they've brought that a new understanding of the world and of their own culture and of their own place in the world back with them. And it's not about, the poor Hondurans. It's about the richness of the Honduran culture and the different ways they see the world and the different ways they're capable of living, that a human being can live on this earth. There's literally hundreds of thousands of ways we can live on this earth, and it's always great to be able to put yourself in a different culture, so that you can see your own with more clarity and see your own life with more perspective.
That's a fascinating way to put it, David. And I think we could probably go on just on that topic for the next couple hours, but sadly it's coming time to wrap up. So David, back to you for any final comments, including possibly if people wanted to support Missoula Medical Aid in any number of ways, could you let them know how they might do that?
Well, In this year, we are doing a lot of reevaluating because everything's changing. We're on ground that's moving, not only here but in Honduras. So this is my first day back as the executive director. So one of my goals is to just have a lot of conversations with people in Honduras, with our partners. What's going on? How can you see us being helpful in the future? This is what we've done in the past, but we don't know what it's going to be like a year from now. What we need from people here in Montana are contributions. We need to keep going. It's hard to raise money when you're not working on particular projects. And we're not working on particular projects because everything's stopped. But we have to keep going through this year so that a year from now, we will be solvent enough to start driving the car, so that's really what we need. We need contributions. We need input from people who have ideas. We are trying to, like I say, we may be reinventing ourselves. But it's all going to be based on conversations with our partners down there and what they think, what they're doing, and what they think our contribution can be to further their ends.
Thanks a lot for that, David, and thanks for the work that you and your volunteers do. Missoula Medical Aid, a really important part of a very vibrant nonprofit community, an organization that's been engaged for nearly 2 decades in international work. So thank you very much for joining us, David. If this kind of thing interests you, some of you will know that we've been, over the past 2.5 months, 2, 3, 4 times a week having these webcasts. You can see them on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page. Check that out if this kind of thing interests you. Now, don't go away because we've got another incredible week here. So again, our focus is on Montana nonprofits with international engagement or international operations. So we heard today from David Cates from Missoula Medical Aid. Tomorrow we have Alice Thomas from the Central Asian Institute, who has extensive community development operations in Tajikistan, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. That's followed by our friends from Ecoviva, Mary Laporte and Ana Luisa Moran-Ahern, who will join us on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, we have Lenka Beranova, whose organization is Seeds for Dreams, and that is in Slovakia. She's a professor at MSU. So please come back and join us each day this week, Monday through Thursday, 9:30. We're going to be talking to somebody different each day to get some idea of the international dimensions of their work and its impact on Montana and Montanans. David, once again, thank you very much for coming on the show. Everybody else, you have a good day. Hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chris.